This is the battle of the Pixel flagship, the Pixel 7 Pro versus Pixel 8 Pro. Who will win? Let's find out. Let's start with color, profile, and saturation. Today we're doing an old versus new comparison between last year's Pixel 7 Pro versus the new Pixel 8 Pro. I mean, if we talk about the Google phones, these are two of the most versatile and best performing Pixel phones today. The new Pixel 8 might have a say on this, but the 5x optical zoom of Pixel 7 Pro is more versatile than the regular Pixel 8. Checking the colors, almost the same on both phones. I don't think you will notice much difference in terms of colors, but the newer Pixel 8 Pro is slightly more vivid than Pixel 7 Pro. Especially looking at the colors of red, orange, and brown, Pixel 8 Pro is a bit more saturated than Pixel 7 Pro. Sometimes even the contrast to with darker background, you will see that Pixel 8 Pro has stronger shadows than Pixel 7 Pro. While the last generation is brighter than Pixel 8 Pro in most scenarios, I mean if you want to better expose photos, then last year's Pixel 7 Pro is still the way to go. Looking on papers, the hardware in Pixel 8 Pro is better than last year. It is evident on the aperture and the resolution. Starting with last year's Google Pixel 7 Pro, it has 50 megapixel main with f1.9 aperture, it has multi-directional face detection autofocus, laser autofocus, and OIS, and followed by 48 megapixel telephoto with 5x optical zoom, still with multi-directional face detection autofocus and OIS. And you have the regular 12 megapixel ultra-wide with autofocus. The selfie camera has a bigger 10.8 megapixel sensor that is 0.3 megapixel bigger than Pixel 8 Pro, and all sensors can shoot at 4K at 60 FPS. While the name of the game for this year's Pixel 8 Pro is the bigger numbers on the rear camera, it has the 50 megapixel shooter with the larger f1.7 aperture, same multi-directional face detection autofocus, multi-zone laser autofocus, and OIS. It has the same 48 megapixel telephoto with larger f2.8 aperture, and it now has a faster dual face detection autofocus, and it can reach 5x optical zoom as well. The ultrawide sensor has 48 megapixel resolution with a larger f2.0 aperture and has dual face detection autofocus too. The front camera has a smaller 10.5 megapixel sensor, but it has an autofocus PDAF, and like last year's Pixel 7 Pro, all sensors can shoot at 4K at 60 FPS. This year's Pixel 8 Pro has unlocked the Pro feature, and you can manually dial the camera settings if you like to. It can also shoot a raw 50 megapixel resolution, but in auto mode, the 12 megapixel JPEG both look similar with that HDR look. I think you will be happy owning any of these two phones. And looking at all three sensors from the ultra-wide, wide, and telephoto, colors are consistent. The weather is pretty brutal. Let's talk about the portrait mode of Pixel 7 Pro and 8 Pro, and both of them are really good. If you're just posting the photos on social media, I think most of the portrait shots from these two phones will suffice, and I bet will stand out compared to some of the competitions. Two things you would get on Pixel phones: first is a really good background blur, and it means you have a larger aperture camera that blurs the background. I also like how the blur isn't distracting at all. It really makes the subject pop out on the image. The other formula of the portrait mode is the detailed but smooth skin effect, and if you zoom in on any of the photos, you can see a lot of details on the face, but at the same time it removes all the imperfection of the skin like a typical AI generated photo. There's a certain glow on the face, and it's always in perfect lighting. The problem with the portrait mode, even with the newer Pixel phone, is the subject separation of Pixel 7 Pro to Pixel 8 Pro. There's not much of a difference, and the problem of cutout is still there. It might be able to detect the edges of the subject on a non-busy background, but anything that's busy and the colors looks the same as the foreground of the subject, you would see hit and miss here and there. The misses are particularly on the head area, so if you're zooming in on the photos, you would know that the images are coming from a smartphone. The main difference between the two phones is the skin tone. I think it's a little bit warmer on Pixel 8 Pro, and in terms of focal length, Pixel 7 Pro is wider, and the 2x zoom can also zoom further. That gives you more or less like a 50mm shot. And looking at the selfie camera, both phones are almost identical. I don't see much of a difference. Maybe the details on the face is much stronger on Pixel 8 Pro. Sometimes a little bit washed out on Pixel 7 Pro, but all good. Both phones can shoot wide and ultra-wide selfie. There's a little bit of improvement on night shots on both phones, but on a comparison test like this, you won't probably notice the difference and which phone is which. Obviously on papers, Pixel 8 Pro has a larger aperture, so it lets in more light. I actually have two takeaways on this comparison test. The night shot on Pixel 7 Pro is a little bit more vivid than the natural looking Pixel 8 Pro, but you would notice on every single image, Pixel 8 Pro exposes the scene better than Pixel 7 Pro. If you look on the trees or the shadowy part of the images, you would see that Pixel 8 Pro will expose it better. In terms of highlights, it's a tie on both phones. It will shoot long exposure HDR photos. And looking at all three sensors from the ultra-wide, wide, and telephoto, Pixel 8 Pro is a tad brighter and has better contrast than last year's Pixel 7 Pro. The day's a little cold in Canada in the weather app or news. I think we should be getting winter around December. But we have the unofficial snow in Canada. This is 4K 60 FPS on Pixel 7 Pro. Right now it's around -6. We normally get around -20 or -30. This is 4K 60 FPS on the new Pixel 8 Pro. Next, let's talk about flaring. If you look at the ultra-wide and wide and 5x optical zoom, there's a purple flaring on the ultra-wide and the main sensor on Pixel 7 Pro. Looking at the highlights, since both phones are shooting on auto HDR, both phones manages the highlights really good. Just a little bit more information on Pixel 7 Pro, looking at the sky. In terms of close focus, both phones have macro capability, so you don't have to worry about those close focus shots. Next is exposure, and if you look on those images with less than ideal light or with shadows, Pixel 8 Pro exposes the shadows better. Sharpness is almost the same on both phones from the ultra-wide, wide, but on the 5x optical zoom, Pixel 7 Pro is applying a little bit of sharpness on the darker area with that ceremonic logo. And lastly, details. Both phones can shoot 12 megapixel JPEG, but only Google Pixel 8 Pro unlocks the Pro feature, and you can shoot JPEG and RAW up to 50 megapixel resolution. The colors is a little bit better on the 50 megapixel, and it is softer compared to the 12 megapixel JPEG. So I think that's it for the image quality. I think it's pretty close. Now let's talk about the video quality from the zoom, audio, stabilization, and low light. Let's start our video test with a cinematic blur. Both phones can shoot full HD at 30 FPS, and although they look similar, Pixel 8 Pro has more contrast and clarity. This is the slow motion test or 1/4, and both phones has the same quality. And same with super slow motion 1/8. I think the only difference is the white balance. It's warmer on Pixel 8 Pro. This is the video zoom test, and the ultra-wide of Pixel 8 Pro has cooler white balance, and I think all throughout it's the same, and both phones has great stabilization. The front camera can also shoot 4K at 60 FPS. One of the things I like about the new Pixel 8 Pro is the Pro mode and all the camera AI features. I think the editing tools like Photo on Blur, Best Take, Magic Eraser, Audio Eraser are pretty good for regular consumers like me. Next is the video stabilization test on all 4 sensors, starting with the ultra-wide lens, and I'm shaking the two phones like crazy to see how good the stabilization is, and they're pretty good. The only difference is the white balance. It is cooler on the older Pixel 7 Pro. This is the main sensor. All video tests were shot on 4K 30 FPS on the stabilization test, and both phones are really good. The only difference I think I see is the contrast. It is greater on Pixel 8 Pro. And this is the 5x optical zoom. I think both phones are shaky, but let me know which 5x optical zoom are better. I think they're almost the same. This is the selfie video in 4K 30 FPS, and both phones are almost identical. Take a look. And lastly, the low light video test, again in 4K 30 FPS. There's a difference in white balance, warmer on Pixel 8 Pro, but there's a weird stuttering on the new Pixel, but this will be polished over time as it receives updates. So this is the ultimate camera shootout of Pixel 7 Pro versus Pixel 8 Pro. If you compare the cameras of these two phones, they are closer than you think, although on papers you would see that there are hardware upgrades on some of the areas. Pixel 7 Pro will give you all the essentials like the new Pixel from the color science, 4K recording, speech enhancement, and video stabilization. While the new Pixel 8 Pro has larger resolution on the ultra-wide, it can now shoot 50 megapixel on the Pro mode, and you can dial the settings manually, and all the AI editing features that you can use to edit your photos. But with all these upgrades, do you think you will be switching to the new Pixel 8 Pro from the older Pixel 7 Pro? Let me know. And there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll continue to compare these two phones in our channel, maybe the new Samsung Galaxy S23 Fan Edition, so stay tuned. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. On my shoulders, I'm strong enough.